A lone hero, a ravaged town, a desecrated church, and the Lord of Terror. These are the most basic components of Diablo, an action role-playing adventure that became one of the most celebrated PC games of all time. Its emphasis on simplicity, randomization, and loot later became synonymous with an entire subgenre. Though the series has sold millions and garnered numerous awards, it almost didn't exist at all. The story of Diablo involves descending into the fiery pits of hell, but its creation starts with a tale of two brothers, Max and Eric Schaefer. As kids, Dungeons & Dragons occupied their weekends and summers. The brothers had little interest in convoluted fantasy lore or extravagant settings. In fact, they didn't even bother paying keen attention to the rules. Their journeys were filled with monster slaying and plunder. The simpler they kept it, the more fun they had. Soon something else dominated the boys' lives, an Apple II Plus home computer. The Apple II was the first time Max and Eric truly fell in love with games. Wizardry and Ultima became two favorites since both brought their pen and paper fantasies to life with tense battles, claustrophobic dungeons, and an enticing element of mystery. After college, Max and Eric wound up working for FM Waves, a company that produced business materials. Although it was the last place they expected to make games, a chance meeting between their boss and the head of Atari changed everything. Atari's boss desperately needed games for the Lynx, and FM Waves was in dire financial straits. Even though no one in the company actually knew how to make it, FM Waves agreed to develop Gordo 106, the mutated lab monkey. The Schaefers were asked to create all of the art for the game, and despite their lack of experience, the brothers were more than happy to work on something other than clip art. Soon after Gordo came into the picture, FM Waves hired a programmer fresh out of college named David Brevik to write the game's code. Together, Brevik and the Schaefer brothers plugged away on Gordo 106, a simplistic platformer starring a renegade primate who rescues caged animals from a science facility. Seeing Gordo spring into action for the first time was a transformative moment for Brevik and the Schaefer brothers. They'd done it. They had a working game. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on their side. FM Waves couldn't get past its financial troubles and was soon unable to pay employees, prompting Brevik to leave the company. He quickly found a spot as a programmer in Iguana Entertainment, where he coded titles like the console versions of Super High Impact and NBA Jam.
Wide open, he's on fire!
Roughly a year later, Iguana decided to move its office from California to Texas. Not wanting to make the transition, Brevik contacted the Schaefer brothers to see if there was any interest in starting their own development studio, since they'd always fantasized about it while working on Gordo. After getting all of the pieces into place, the three of them formed Condor, Inc. During Brevik's time at Iguana, he managed to make quite a few valuable contacts at several game publishers. One of these contacts was David Siller, an executive at Sunsoft aware of Brevik's talent. Siller had 3 games that needed to be made, and gave Condor the pick of the litter. Being the comic book geeks they were, Condor chose Justice League Task Force, a Street Fighter II clone for the Sega Genesis that pit DC superheroes like Batman and Superman against each other. And with that, Condor's first project was underway, but they needed more than 3 people. The company brought on Michio Okamura, Tom Byrne, and Kelly Johnson as additional artists, hired Richard Sees as a programmer, and got Matt Ullman to handle the music. While the entire studio enjoyed the challenge of making a fighting game, Brevik and the Schaefer brothers had greater ambitions. During the development of Task Force, Brevik presented a thick stack of design documents to his team. He told them that this was the dream game they'd someday make. Its name, Diablo. The idea for Diablo was primarily inspired by 3 games: Moria, Angband, and XCOM UFO Defense. All of them had a common element: randomly generated maps. Brevik loved the idea of randomly generated maps because it made the game feel like it belonged to the player. A programmer wasn't funneling anyone through their grand vision. Instead, the game came to life as it happened. While Moria and Angban's graphics were crudely represented with numbers, letters, and shapes, XCOM's isometric perspective captivated Brevik and the Schaefer brothers. The vision for Diablo was to capture Moria and Angban's sense of adventure while mimicking XCOM's look. Condor's founders figured they finally had a chance to pitch Diablo at CES 95, where they'd be showing off Justice League Task Force. The trio arrived at the event early, grabbing any publisher that listened. The response, however, was always the same: role-playing games are dead. Computer RPGs struggle to keep up with graphical advancements of other games like Doom or Myst, and had become increasingly stat-laden, appealing only to the most hardcore players. As a result, sales plummeted, and publishers didn't want to touch any sort of Dungeons or Dragons. Diablo seemed like a dead dream, but a pleasant surprise awaited in Sunsoft's booth. Another studio worked on a Super Nintendo version of Task Force, which Brevik and the Schaefer brothers only found out when they saw the team in person. That other company went by the name Blizzard Entertainment, and it was clear they had passion. The group came across like a bunch of gamers making games, rather than some suits trying to grab a quick buck. Blizzard wanted to get more PC games under its belt, and seeing the perfect opportunity, Brevik and the Schaefers pitched them Diablo. After a long period of waiting and negotiation, the stars aligned. By the end of February 1995, Blizzard and Condor settled on a contract. With a publisher behind them, Diablo could finally become a reality. The very first goal was to nail the feel of the game. To help, Brevik reverse-engineered XCOM to better understand how it worked. Everything took place on a grid, with each character and object occupying a lone tile. Diablo functioned the same way. Using Condor's own crude tiling system, the team slowly started on the game's 16-floor dungeon. For movement, the game relied on mouse-driven commands. Players stepped across the grid tile by tile with one click. Picking up items, opening the inventory, and attacking also happened with a single click. To honor the legacy of the roguelike genre Brevik loved, Diablo utilized turn-based gameplay. The player was safe as long as he remained stationary, allowing time for planning and managing items. There was only one problem. Blizzard didn't like it. After playing an early build of the game, they thought the turn-based system wasn't exciting enough. The company's experience with Warcraft Orcs and Humans demonstrated that players enjoyed making split-second decisions in the heat of battle. Having an unlimited amount of time to plan the next move extinguished any sense of urgency. Brevik and the Schaefer brothers countered that because Diablo was a modern interpretation of roguelikes, the game had to remain turn-based to stay true to the genre. Besides, the trio didn't want to be told how to make their game. It turned out the rest of Condor didn't agree. The overwhelming majority of the team thought the switch to real-time gave Diablo a better chance at success. If Brevik and the Schaefer brothers stuck to their guns, Diablo wouldn't represent what Condor as a whole believed in. That weekend, Brevik sat down at his computer and pored over the game's code. How could he completely rehaul everything? After a sleepless night of staring at his monitor, Brevik somehow managed to create an entirely new version of his dream project. To this day, he describes one moment as the most important in his career. Playing a warrior, Brevik saw a skeleton on the other side of the room. He clicked, his character walked over, and then smashed the monster into a pile of bone. The immediacy made the fight thrilling in a way Diablo hadn't been before. Moving forward, simplicity became Diablo's chief goal. Unlike the slow pace of contemporary RPGs, Brevik wanted players slaying monsters as quickly as possible after starting the game, and for every action to feel as good as killing that first skeleton. A lot of it had to do with audio and visual feedback. Using a health potion produces an odd but satisfying bubbling noise. Gold pieces clink together upon picking them up, and equipping heavy armor makes a heavy metallic thud. Like the sound effects, ridiculous death animations add a lot to Diablo's appeal. Goblin-like monsters named the Fallen flop to the ground with their organs splayed out on the floor, and the hulking Steel Lords burst into white flame upon death. The small touches are important, but Diablo's greatest strength is randomization. The fact that every single enemy, chest, and barrel could hold a new, powerful item makes the desire to search every inch of a dungeon floor impulsive. Magically imbued items have randomized attributes, so choosing between two pieces of gear is often difficult. Should you sacrifice weapon damage to boost the power of spells, or take increased movement speed over more armor? The lack of a right build made experimenting over multiple playthroughs exciting.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
Optional quests further enhance replayability. These quests are categorized into groups, and one quest from each group is always absent, making it entirely possible to see the end without ever hearing the butcher's cry for fresh meat.
Fresh meat.
Diablo's character progression system offers a surprising amount of flexibility for its time. At the start, players pick an archetype. The warrior is the beefiest of the three and prefers to get in close. The rogue slaughters enemies from a distance with her bow, and the sorcerer wields lightning, fire, and arcane magic. While each has a distinct feel, they can choose to pump points into whichever stat they wish when they level up, allowing characters to change dramatically over time. Even a warrior can cast every spell as long as his magic is at the appropriate level. For a game that does such a good job making you feel empowered, Diablo has a hopeless tone. Impaled corpses, burning crosses, and pentagrams are common sights. Condor wanted to make a fantasy game that didn't feel like other fantasy games, settling on a gothic style that immediately made it stand out.
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
Just as defining as Diablo's look is its soundtrack. Matt Ullman filled the themes with low, pounding drums and distant screams that grind away confidence. While all of the tracks hold up 18 years later, none are more memorable than Tristram. Titled after the game's town hub, a 12-string guitar creates a tone that's simultaneously warm and ghost-like. Because the song plays when you repair items and buy gear, it's meant to feel safe while also maintaining a lingering sense of dread that hints at the dangers found in the dungeon below. From a development standpoint, making Diablo went as smoothly as anyone could have hoped for. After the switch to real-time, it seemed like everything fell into place. Despite the creative high around the office, persistent financial troubles threatened to kill what everyone worked so hard to achieve. Right around the time Condor spent almost every penny it had, Blizzard stepped in. Thanks to the huge successes of Warcraft and Warcraft 2, Blizzard had earned the trust of its parent company, Davidson and Associates. Believing Diablo would be another PC hit, they made plans to acquire Condor. The deal finalized in March 1996, and Condor became Blizzard North. In addition to the name change, the acquisition came with one very big request. Blizzard wanted Diablo to use Battle.net, its new online service that allowed for free online multiplayer over the internet and local area networks. While Blizzard North was excited at the prospect, they were also terrified. Diablo is set to release in less than 6 months, and the implementation of Battle.net would require a complete overhaul. After an intense few months, Blizzard North finally got Battle.net to play nice, and Diablo released on December 31st, 1996. The game did astoundingly well, going on to sell more than 2.5 million copies worldwide. Diablo also received glowing reviews, and GameSpot dubbed it the 1996 Game of the Year. Diablo's triumph made the idea of an expansion obvious. Blizzard North had its eyes toward the future, however, and other avenues had to be explored. Hellfire, Diablo's first and only official expansion, was developed by Synergistic Software, a division of Sierra Entertainment. Hellfire offered new quests, a new storyline, new items, and a new class, the Monk, a dexterous fighter skilled in unarmed combat. The expansion also greatly improved the mechanics of the original game in a number of important ways. A jog option allowed players to move around town more quickly. The search spell highlighted loot on the ground so players wouldn't miss anything. And a teleport spell zipped you to the nearest staircase for a quick escape. Outside of Hellfire, Diablo also made its way to the PlayStation in March 1998 and appeared on the Macintosh in May that same year. While the Mac version was largely identical to its PC counterpart, the PlayStation version featured completely different menus, so navigation made sense with a controller. It also had a slightly zoomed-in view, so items could be seen more easily. Regardless of how players experienced Diablo, the game felt well ahead of its time. It premiered on Windows 95 when most games were made for DOS, offered free multiplayer over the internet, and most importantly, established the tenets of the action RPG. For as monumental as Diablo was, the team at Blizzard North was far from finished. The best was yet to come.
All I know is that when he beckoned, I had to follow him. And from that moment, we traveled together east, always into the east.